surprised that the Provost is speaking on the side of the proposition. I think it's the first time that myself and the Provost have ever agreed on anything. Anyways, I'd like to speak a bit about Trinity College London. Every year, we face fee increases, accommodation that costs 10,000 euros a year, long waiting lists to access mental health services, a lack of hybrid learning, and despite all the empty promises that we get from management, nothing ever seems to change. Trinity College Dublin, much like any other aspect of late-stage capitalist society, is the place where those of us who are the most vulnerable are also treated with the greatest disrespect. We need to ask ourselves how we got here. The topic of this debate is, of course, whether we should coup the provost or not. Now, I don't think the provost wants to increase fees or anything like that. I have read the provost manifesto, and it was very progressive, and this is true for all provosts, of course. But yet, year on year, decisions adverse to our communities are made. Decisions devoid of the duty of care, and they're all made in one singular pursuit, that of profit. Universities, due to government underfunding, have essentially started acting like for-profit businesses, casualizing staff, cutting essential services like counseling and increasing fees. Of course, the provost and senior management do not want this at all. However, the provost, like any other senior management, are deeply complicit in the neoliberalization of our universities. This excuse that the government is underfunding us and that there's nothing we can do, it must fall on deaf ears at some point. The argument that we must toe the line, not challenge the government, or we will lose funding, is an invalid argument. University management teams, including the provost, have aided and abetted the commercialization of the third-level sector over decades. This is through their passivity or their active pushing of a managerial and corporate culture, because after all, it is in the interest of senior management to establish autocratic and corporate structures because they centralize power. Their steadfast passivity in face of this war by the government against academia, underfunding, is nothing short of a dereliction of duty. These structures that have arisen in college, whereby college not only doesn't care, is actually incapable of caring, the provost and senior management hold a big role in that. And we see this in Trinity, right? It's supposedly a democracy, yet the provost and her apparatchiks dominate board, finance committee. These autocratic structures must be dismantled in favor of student, staff, grassroots governance. I will say a few examples of this. For example, the increase in fees this year, that was a 10% fee increase over 4 years for non-EU and postgraduate students. This is a direct contradiction of the provost's promise at the GSU hustings last year for the provost elections. This is an increase of 2,000 to 5,000 euros over 4 years. The closure of the science gallery. We only needed 1 million euros to keep the science gallery running, and yet Trinity nor the government, they couldn't provide it. And yet we are spending millions and millions of euros on shiny new buildings, or on recruiting international students, or 70 million on real estate property development in 2020. I read the financial reports. The continued underfunding of counseling services, I think, is absolutely disgraceful. They have 2 to 3 months waiting times, and nothing ever seems to change. I'd like to say another example. That's about how the Irish Universities Association lobbied for an exemption from the 4% rent increases in 2019. The Irish Universities Association is essentially a conference of university heads. These are ways in which senior management are actively pushing a corporate agenda onto higher level institutions. All of these examples in Trinity were agreed to by the provost. Nothing gets done without the provost's approval. But every time such a decision is made, it's not out of the bad will of the provost. It's essentially that what we are saying is we are powerless and we are fitting into the neoliberal world order. Provosts have neglected their duty to institutions that they're supposed to represent, and their passivity has led to the continued underfunding of academia. I don't see the provost campaigning publicly. I don't see letters in the press. I don't see public protest. Senior management actually enjoyed quite a cozy relationship with the civil service and with the government. And of this cowardice, because that's what it is us students and staff who must bear the brunt. And I think that is just unacceptable. I will go even so far as to say that senior management and the government belong to the same class, the ruling class. on bloated salaries, it might not appear such an issue that students and staff on the ground are struggling. But I have seen students being evicted, students struggling to pay for their groceries, students that are in rent and feed at. 250 students are in rent and feed at to Trinity here, and yet nothing is done. These are 250 individual stories and students and families that are suffering. So as we joke here and as we make these great speeches, because they were great and they were really funny as well, let us not forget why this debate came about. Let us not forget all these individual stories. I'll talk about another example, and that is the HA bill. There's no better example of the causal relationship between the government and senior management than the HA bill. This bill is a bill put forward by Minister Simon Harris, and it will lead to a reduction in student, staff and trade union representation from the governing bodies of higher level institutions. I would like to remind the Provost about the October 6th board meeting minutes. Stakeholders were crying out for the college to do something, yet it did not go public. The consultation of the college with regards to the bill was an absolute sham. It was 1 hour long and people weren't allowed to speak. This bill should have been debated on campus, line by line, yet the college didn't really put up much of an opposition. Meanwhile, Minister Harris does photo shoots for Fine Gael on campus, like on the 2nd of June. So what I propose is, next time Minister Harris comes here, we tell him what he's doing isn't working. We tell him our counselling has months-long waiting times. We tell him that 60% of college buildings are in need of repair, that we have overstressed administrative staff, that our postgrads aren't being paid, that students and staff are struggling. Why don't we tell this to his face? Rather than try to appease him, because in the end, this is what this question is about. Will we lay down and take it, the disrespect that this government affords us, or will we stand up and fight? And in that fight, I invite the Provost to take part. Thank you very much.